The majority of history that you can find about the French Eversole feud ends with the death of Judge Josiah Combs and then skips to the death of Benjamin French. But a lot of history went on in the meantime. One such event that happened was when Polly Combs, the widow of Judge Combs, sued for the heartbreak and unlawful death of her husband. While she could not win her case, it was instrumental in bringing about the verdict in the Widow Marcum's case in the Breathitt County War. While we will end the French Eversole feud in this section, the conflict is not over and will extend into Leslie and Breathitt County. Several of the other counties will also fight similar battles that are attributed to the feud, including Letcher County, Knott County, and Floyd County. All aboard the Kentucky-Tennessee Living Time Machine. Please fasten your seatbelts and keep your arms and legs inside of the vehicle at all times. But to get going, we need your help. We still need to fire up the time machine to transport us. Please help us by clicking on the like, subscribe, and bell notification buttons down below. Not only does this help us to fire up the time machine, but it convinces YouTube that we need a bigger time machine to reach more people who love history as much as you do. Now, back to our story. Overlooked history. We had previously talked about this shooting and how it might have sparked the resurrection of the feud. However, we rediscovered something interesting in this article. Elizabeth Polly Ann Mattingly Combs, otherwise known as Polly Combs, was listed as a person being wounded in the feud. According to the Crichton Press on May 25, 1893, quote, London, Kentucky, May 20th. That bloody war that was waged so fearfully a few years ago in Perry County between the Eversole and French factions, and which everybody was hoping had been settled forever, has again broken out. The fight resulted in the instant death of Jessie Hale and the serious wounding of Polly Ann Combs, the grandmother of Cash and John Eversole. Jessie Field received 2 wounds, one in the arm and one in the back, and John Eversole received a pistol wound in the wrist. Unquote. Polly Combs would be the first woman to be wounded in this feud. It is not clear in this article if she obtained these wounds by accidental shooting as a bystander or if it was intentional, as she was the wife of Judge Josiah Combs. However, because she was shot, the women of the area were no longer kept out of the feud. When she lost her husband, she decided to take her cause to the court of law and sue for damages to her family by the French faction. As we have stated before, Judge Combs' death was on September 23, 1894, and it was devastating to the family, and the accused had went to court and been tried and convicted for the crime. It is unclear if Combs took an active role in the feud, but he did take sides when he refused to bring charges against his son-in-law, Joseph C. Eversole, and tried to bring the French faction to justice for their actions in the conflict. His death would be the moment that the violence of Perry County would cease and everything would play out in the court of law. However, Polly Combs was not about to let his death go unanswered by Fulton French. Fulton French Court Woes. A very surprising twist happened during the murder trial of Judge Josiah Combs. One of the French most loyal and trusted lieutenants of the conflict, Tom Smith, began to give a full confession the moment he realized he was not going to succeed in court and that he was going to face the gallows. His confession would lead to charges being brought against French for murder. He would be indicted for these charges. According to the Morning Times, Washington, D.C., January 2, 1897, quote, fears assassination. Lexington, Kentucky, October 3rd. B.F. French, leader of the famous French Eversole mountain feud, who has been indicted on the charge of murdering Judge Combs, will not go to Perry County for trial until he has a guard. He fears the Eversoles will assassinate him. Unquote. However, against these protests, French would go to trial for the murder plot of Combs. While French was going through the court system on these charges, he would be facing more charges by the widow Combs. Lawsuit filed. The lawsuit would be filed on January of 1896, just 2 years after the death of Judge Combs, which makes it all the more puzzling as to why this played out the way it did in the court system. According to the Mount Sterling Advocate in their January 21st, 1896 edition, quote, "In the Perry Court, the widow of Judge Josiah Combs has filed suit against Fulton French, charging him with being an accessory to the murder of her husband," unquote. This would not be a simple slap on the wrist. Elizabeth Polly Ann Madeline Combs would bring a lawsuit against Fulton French to answer for her husband's murder. This suit would claim $10,000 in damages, which would equate to $250,000 in today's money. According to the comment in the January 23rd, 1896 edition, quote, "Fulton French of the French Eversole Feud fame has been sued for $10,000 damages by the widow of Judge Josiah Combs, who charges French as being accessory to the murder of her husband," unquote. Fulton French had just escaped going to the gallows, or life in prison, for his leadership in the feud so far. He was charged with plotting the murder of Judge Combs through the testimony of Tom Smith. And now he was facing a lawsuit from the widow Combs for the unlawful death of her husband, and she was seeking major damages. Verdicts. The courts for the time being would be on French's side of things, as the gallows testimony and confession was deemed to not being legally worthy to stand up in a court of law, and so French was acquitted of any wrongdoing in this case. As for the lawsuit brought by the widow Combs, according to the Daily Public Ledger, Maysville, Kentucky, January 16, 1896, and other listed sources, quote, "Jackson, Kentucky, January 16th. Fulton French of the French Eversole Feud fame has been sued in Perry Circuit Court at Hazard for $10,000 damages by the widow Judge Josiah Combs, charging French with being accessory to the murder of Judge Combs, but recovery cannot be had on account of the statutes of limitations," unquote. Even though the lawsuit would take place within 5 years of the murder of her husband, Judge Josiah Combs, the widow Combs lost her case due to the statute of limitations at the time. But this was not a total victory for French, as he would face a bigger lawsuit in the Breathitt County War for the murder of Marcum. While this feud ends the French Eversole feud in Perry County, many of the same people would continue the feud in Breathitt and Leslie counties. This feud would officially end with the death of Benjamin French at the hands of the son of his enemy, Joseph C. Eversole, and a truce would be made between the two factions shortly afterward. Thank you. We at Kentucky Tennessee Living would like to thank you for watching our video series on the Appalachian Feuds. Don't forget to hit that like button, as the more likes we receive, the more likely YouTube is to suggest our videos to other viewers. Also, to receive notice when we upload a new video, be sure to subscribe and click the bell notification. We thank you for continuing to support Kentucky Tennessee Living as we are discovering the mysteries of Appalachian history.